What if I told you Alaska was once sold for 2 cents an acre, and Americans called it the dumbest deal ever? Or that it faced a Japanese invasion in World War II? From Russian fur wars to the Klondike Stampede, Alaska's history is colder, wilder, and weirder than anywhere else in America. This is how the last frontier became a state, and why it's still fighting for its future. Echoes from the edge of the world, the ancient heart of Alaska. Long before the maps were drawn or flags were planted, Alaska pulsed with the spirit of its first peoples. Cultures as old as the land itself, shaped by ice, time, and survival. Thousands of years ago, they crossed the Bering Land Bridge, not knowing they were writing the first chapter of a continent's story. In the wind-swept Tanana Valley, the tiny remains of a 6-week-old girl, now called the ancient Beringian, were unearthed, her DNA whispering secrets of a forgotten lineage, a people long separate from all others in the New World. These early Alaskans, Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian, crafted a world rich in art, identity, and matrilineal wisdom, their lives interwoven with the forests and coasts of the Pacific. But the shadows came. Smallpox swept through their communities like a ghostly tide, leaving devastation in its wake. Whole villages vanished. Traditions were disrupted. And yet, even in sorrow, they endured. They moved, they rebuilt, they clung to memory. Alaska's indigenous story isn't just ancient. It's resilient, haunting, and alive in the bones of the mountains and the songs of the sea. Icons, otters, and empires. The battle for Alaska's soul. Alaska's colonization reads like a ghost story told by firelight. Whispers of bearded men, praying to icons in a land untouched by Europe, long before any official flag was planted. Some say Russian survivors of a 1648 storm may have founded a secret settlement near the Koyuk River, decades before maps knew the name Alaska. Then came the explorers, Russian ships cutting through icy fog, drawn not by conquest, but by the gleam of sea otter pelts, softer and more valuable than gold. The Spanish, not to be outdone, sailed north to lay claim with names like Cordova and Valdez. Sitka, renamed New Archangel, rose as the heart of Russian America, grand and isolated in the misty archipelago. But the empire faded. In 1867, with a quiet exchange on Castle Hill, the double-headed eagle fell and the stars and stripes rose, a ceremony watched by soldiers in silence. America's Seward's Folly was born for $7.2 million, a bargain price for a wilderness of secrets. Yet the land remained wild, barely governed, and American settlers trickled in slowly, setting up makeshift governments in the shadow of Russian churches. The soul of Alaska, a tug-of-war between empires, still echoed with the prayers of those first mysterious, bearded men. Gold, war, and the long road to belonging. The land of Alaska, wild and unyielding, became a siren call in the late 1800s, a glittering promise buried in its rivers and rock. The gold rushes thundered in, and with them, a flood of dreamers, digging not just for riches but for redemption. From the chill of the Yukon to the heart of Juneau, over $460 million worth of minerals reshaped the map and filled pockets, equivalent to billions today. By 1912, Alaska was no longer just a distant prize. It became an official U.S. territory, and its capital moved from Sitka to Juneau, where the governor's mansion rose as a symbol of order in a still unruly frontier. Immigrants from Norway and Sweden carved out new lives in the forests and seas, logging and fishing their place into Alaska's fabric. But then, the drums of World War II echoed across the Pacific. Japan occupied the remote Aleutian Islands, Attu, Agatu, Kiska, marking Alaska as a front line in a global war. Civilians vanished into internment camps, with many never returning. Amid the chaos, Dutch Harbor and Adak transformed into nerve centers of U.S. military power, and Soviet pilots flew warbirds from Nome into the fire of Europe. In war and in peace, Alaska's value rose not just in gold, but in blood and bravery, and through it all it crept ever closer to the American heart. Shaken to the core, the trial that forged Alaska. Alaska's journey to statehood was a fight born of persistence and passion. James Wickersham lit the fire early in the 20th century, but it wasn't until 1959 that the last star was stitched into the American flag. Just 5 years later, that young state would be tested like no other. On Good Friday, 1964, the ground roared beneath Alaska with a fury unmatched by nearly any earthquake in history. A staggering magnitude 9.2. Towns were torn asunder. Mountains rose, coastlines fell. Entire villages vanished under tsunamis and landslides. Anchorage cracked open, homes crumbled, and people fled for their lives. But in the chaos, voices rose, like journalist Jeannie Chance, who became a lifeline over the airwaves, uniting a broken city with words and hope. Scientists battled politics to rebuild smarter, stronger. The military, swift as shadow, restored order and delivered lifelines from the sky. From Valdez to Kodiak, destruction gave way to determination. Alaska didn't just survive the quake. It found its strength in it. The disaster, catastrophic as it was, carved something deeper than destruction. It forged a spirit of resilience that would define the 49th state for generations to come. Black gold and wild beauty, Alaska's tug of war. When oil burst from the frozen earth at Prudhoe Bay in 1968, Alaska was forever changed. By 1977, a steel artery, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, was pumping black gold across the state, and with it came a flood of wealth. The oil boom fueled government budgets, reshaped towns, and promised prosperity. But Alaska's soul couldn't be bought so easily. As tourists arrived in droves, drawn by tales of raw beauty and wilderness whispered home by soldiers of World War II, a new love for the land took root. Roads carved by war and ferries spanning glaciers and fjords made the last frontier reachable and unforgettable. With the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act in 1980, a breathtaking 53.7 million acres were locked away for future generations, an act of defiance against unchecked development. But the dance between industry and nature turned tragic in 1989, when the Exxon Valdez bled crude oil into Prince William Sound, marring over 1,000 miles of pristine shoreline. That wound still stings. Today, the battle rages on, in courtroom debates over drilling in sacred lands, in the shadow of proposed megamines, and in the hearts of Alaskans trying to balance riches beneath their feet with the wildness in their skies. So, was Seward's Folly actually a genius move? Should Alaska be its own country? Debate below. If you enjoyed this journey through America's last frontier, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Next up, we're exploring Hawaii/Texas. So stay tuned on History Love.